Thank you. I'm Sandy Quinn, President of the Richard Nixon Foundation. Thank you for coming. Welcome. Please join me in welcoming our guest speakers tonight, accompanied by our foundation chairman, Ron and Ann Walker, and led by the president of our Docent Guild, Marge Garvey, ladies and gentlemen, secretary, and Mrs. Don Rumsfeld. Now, ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing. No, wait a minute, I messed that up. Please sit down. No, please remain standing for the presentation of the colors.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Thank you.
Please join in thanking Gulf Command 2nd Battalion, 23rd Marines for that eloquent presentation of the colors, and to our great singer, our legendary Robbie Brett. Thank you, Robbie. Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, we're blessed tonight with indeed a room full of VIPs, and I want to recognize our board of directors who are here, I think, in a quorum, so we can do some business tonight. Ladies and gentlemen, members of our board, beginning with Ambassador George Ardra. Please stand when I mention your name. Ambassador. Our Treasurer, John Barr. Our Treasurer, John Barr. Our past Chairman, Don Bendetti. A new member of our Board of Directors, James Kavanaugh. A longtime member, Gavin Herbert. A new member, Larry Higbee. Another new member, Todd Hullen. Our longtime good friend, Maureen Nunn, who apparently brought her own cheering section, and our good friend of many, many years, Hubert Perry. And now our chairman, who you will hear from now, Ron Walker.
Thanks, Sandy. 2 weeks ago, I was president of the Presidential Foundation. I flunked retirement about 17 months ago, I tell my friends. And then once Sandy was named president, I flunked again. Some people say I missed the meeting and now I'm chairman. Somehow, I don't know how those things happen, but it's an honor. This year has been a very special year for the foundation. There are any number of people in this room that have played a significant role over the years in building this magnificent library, birthplace, and special hallowed grounds where the President and Mrs. Nixon are buried. Ann and I had an opportunity to escort the Secretary and Joyce through the grounds this afternoon. They both laid a wreath at President Nixon's grave and paid their respects to Mrs. Nixon. That's always a very touching moment for me. I was instrumental with Bill Simon in dedicating this place 20-some-odd years ago, and then very much involved in both of the preparation for both of their funerals. We buried we buried her, and I had the opportunity to ride in a motorcade with the President shortly after the burial. And those of you who were here or experienced it on television or in any other way saw how emotional the President was. And I know that Hubert and George and Don and John can attest to that. And I looked over at the President and I said, "Sir, what now?" And he said, "Ron, I'm going to write my 10th book, and I'm going to do it in 9 months." And I said to him, I said, "Mr. President, why would you put that kind of pressure on yourself?" And he said, "It's the only way I can handle it." Interestingly enough, he died 11 months later, but the book was finished. What we have done this year is that we have, with the help of Jeff Shepard. Jeff, why don't you stand right quick, let the audience recognize you. Jeff, who over the last 25 or 30 years has kept an awful lot of the Nixon people engaged in Washington every year. And when I became president, my first goal was to reach out to those former Nixon people that for whatever reason had not been invited or include in what was going on here at the library. And so I asked Jeff to help me. Then we took those individuals that lived during those years and had them do what we call the Nixon Legacy Series. So far we have done 7, and 6 of those have been covered by C-SPAN. It's the individuals that lived, worked, and did the things that were so good, far beyond Watergate, but told the story of how much was being done during the Nixon years. Next year, 2012, we celebrate her 100th. And in 2013, we celebrate his 100. So there's a lot of things going on right now. And as we move forward in our 20th year here, if any of you have been through the exhibits, you'll see that they're a little tired, but they still tell the story. They need to be upgraded. Maybe the National Archives, if they can ever get their act together, will help us in upgrading those. If they don't, we'll do it ourselves. We'll do it with your help. We have a Watergate exhibit that we did maybe 15 years ago that told the story. In all fairness, it told the story from President and Mrs. Nixon's standpoint, which would to be expected. The National Archives came in, ripped it out, said they'll put a new exhibit in. This was 3 years ago, and Don and Joyce, you saw it today, it's still empty. We will have that exhibit up and running in some form or fashion in the not too distant future if it causes heartburn for a lot of people. Finally, without your help, this library cannot continue. We've had so much help over these years, and many of those people are in this audience today. We have had a serious outreach by a lot of young people that have joined our staff to go into Facebook and Twitter, and if you're getting the 1-minute notices, I can't even spell what they're doing, but these young people are terrific. And if you've seen the 1-minute updates or what we're doing Facebook-wise and everything else, we're going to bring more young people in, and we're going to reach into another generation that don't even know what Watergate is all about. I had occasion to go over to Whittier, and Sharon, the president of Whittier, is here, when I first came here as president, and they brought in the Nixon Fellow, a terrific young man who ended up being an intern for us this past summer. And as he came into the room, I asked him, I said, "Son, tell me what Watergate is." And he said, "Well, isn't it a building?" And that gave me a clue right there that we have a terrific opportunity to reach out to young people that weren't even born when Watergate happened, to tell the story of what really happened. And there are a lot of facts that haven't come out, and I think we'll never get past it, but we can make it a story that helps tell our story from the president's standpoint. And with that, finally, I would like to thank Larry and George so very much for taking the time out of your busy schedules to chair as co-chairs for this dinner. It's a magnificent show from our standpoint, and I think we've got a few surprises for you as the evening goes forward. And now I'd like to have you just enjoy your dinner. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm sure a lot of you have been sharing stories back and forth over the evening here, and we've been fortunate enough to share several stories with Don and Joyce. And the one I always remember is the fact that Don sort of launched my career. After Watergate was over, I was sitting over in this tiny office in the EOB, and I got a call from Don, and he asked I come over right away. And of course, you do come over right away because he's now the Chief of Staff to the President of the United States. And I said, "I'm going over there, I'm sure to be fired." And I walk over, and he says, "Larry, sit down." He said, what are you planning on doing with your life?" And I said, "Well," I said, now I have 2 children, and I'm living here in Washington, and I'm looking at some jobs in the administration." And I said, "I'm also looking at a job at a company called PepsiCo." And he said, you don't want to stay in the government. And I said, oh, okay. And he said, he turned around and he said, he picked up his phone and he said, give me Don Kendall at PepsiCo. And only when you're in the White House does Don Kendall come on about 5 seconds later. So there's a buzz back and Don picks up the phone and he said, I'm here talking with Larry Higby and I understand you're considering him for a job up at PepsiCo. And he said, I just want you to know he's done an outstanding job and he's really a good guy and I would highly recommend him. And I said thank you very much to him, and I walked back to my office, and by the time I got back to my office, Kendall had called and said, how soon can you get up here? I'd like to talk to you. So fortunately, Don was on my side, and because of that, I was able to enjoy a very successful career in business, as well as continue to meet a lot of good friends and come back to California. So Don, thank you for that very, very much. But there are an awful lot of people across the country and across the generations who Don has made a tremendous difference in their life. And just for a moment, some of them couldn't be here tonight, but I'd just like to share with you what they had to say about Don. So if we could, let's roll the tape.
Unless we in America work to preserve freedom, there will be no freedom.
Few people in American history have worked as hard and as well to preserve and extend freedom as Don Rumsfeld. Stretching back more than 50 years, Don Rumsfeld has served his country and 5 of America's presidents with devotion, determination, and dedication.
We've been through war together. We have shared some of the most challenging moments in our nation's history. I have come to appreciate Don Rumsfeld's professionalism, his dedication, his strategic vision, his deep devotion to the men and women of our nation who wear the uniform, and his love for the United States of America.
Across his decades of public service, Don Rumsfeld earned the respect and admiration of leaders in government and in business, in the corridors of power and on the front lines of the fight for freedom.
If you combine really high intelligence with a tremendous amount of energy and a capacity for good judgment, you get something special. That's Don Rumsfeld.
Don Rumsfeld is an intensely competitive person who is a deep patriot of enormous courage, who loves his country, who has an inexhaustible work ethic.
Over the past 40 years, a great many of the alumni of the Nixon administration have gone on to serve our country with great distinction. Few, however, have given as much to our country as Donald Rumsfeld.
Don Rumsfeld has been one of the distinguished public servants of his period. It can surely be said that he left his mark on his time.
In the last half century, this country has not had a man involved in more great national enterprises, made more crucial decisions, served his country in more ways with more wisdom, with more courage, and with more dedication.
I might say he was billed as a real star, fast-track guy. But I can't help but notice that this wonderful award he's getting today, I got several years earlier, so I don't know how fast-track he really is.
A naval aviator, a congressional aide, and then a 4-term congressman, a counselor to presidents, an ambassador, twice Secretary of Defense, and a corporate CEO, Don Rumsfeld has consistently confirmed President Nixon's assessment of more than 40 years ago that he has the experience, the judgment, and the courage to handle immensely important assignments.
I interviewed with him to see about going to work for him while he was a member of Congress. The interview did not go well. In relatively short order, he stood up, said this isn't going to work, and I found myself back out in the hallway.
He was always an interesting person to work with. He always was energetic. He was always oriented to the mission that was assigned to him.
I had one of the best jobs in Washington as Don Rumsfeld's assistant. He was a very tough boss, but he was very fair, and he taught me a great deal about the way our nation's capital works.
We all remember and have been instructed by the great Rumsfeld rules, one of my favorite of which was to explain there are three kinds of knowledge in the world. There are the known knowns, that means the things you know you know. There are the known unknowns, meaning the things you know you don't know. And then there are the unknown unknowns, which are the things you don't know you don't know.
He had more intellectual energy, more physical energy than anybody in the Pentagon.
His impact on the Pentagon was in many ways the most profound since McNamara.
His work as Secretary of Defense on 2 separate tours has been a model for all future secretaries.
When our country was attacked on September 11th, Don Rumsfeld became the first Secretary of Defense in history to face an attack on America's homeland. At this crucial moment, his calm, courageous leadership created confidence across the nation and around the world. Confidence that America would stand strong.
I'm looking around for Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld, and I'm told that he's out where the aircraft impacted the building, outside the building, and helping with those that were injured and wounded.
He reacted with a customary Rumsfeld-like directness, moving to the scene of conflict, trying to help save lives, taking charge in a way that was very practical and very effective.
He's been there when it counted most, when our nation was in trouble, when we were threatened, when we needed to have the kind of firm guidance and leadership that only a man like Don Rumsfeld can provide.
Secretary Rumsfeld found himself in charge at the very beginning of what will end up being a very long and very difficult conflict.
Secretary Rumsfeld saw firsthand that we were in fact at war with this adversary because he just walked one of the battlefields.
A career spent in the arena demands a great deal, not just of the leader who dares greatly, but also of his family. Don has been blessed with the love and support of his magnificent wife, Joyce, and of their 3 marvelous children.
Joyce is just a sensational human being, and she's just a fount of common sense, good cheer, balance.
We are grateful for the generosity of spirit, the gregariousness, the thoughtfulness of their friendship.
Don and Joyce are 2 of our oldest and dearest friends. They've been tremendously important in our lives and in the life of the nation.
Joyce, God bless you. All of us who've had the pleasure of being anywhere near you certainly appreciate all you've done.
For more than half a century, Don Rumsfeld has upheld the blessings of freedom with unflagging energy, unmatched excellence, and unmistakable exuberance. For his extraordinary contribution to the victory of freedom, the Richard Nixon Foundation honors him tonight.
This honor you're getting this evening is a great one, and I want to join others in saying congratulations to you.
Congratulations, Mr. Secretary, on your Victory of Freedom Award tonight. There's nobody more deserving than you.
Don, you've been a great patriot, a brilliant man, whom I'm honored to consider a personal friend.
As a friend and for your service as a citizen, I commend you, Don. I congratulate you on this wonderful award.
Congratulations to you, Don, and to Joyce on this very special evening.
Thank you for helping us have a country that is worth fighting for.
Congratulations, Don. America has remained a great country because of courageous, patriotic citizens like you.
Congratulations. I can't think of anybody who deserves this award more. We're delighted that we're able to share in this evening.
Ladies and gentlemen, one more time, let's thank the Marine Corps Air Ground Combat Center Band from 29 Palms. Thank you. Please be seated. Well, I'll tell you, every time you hear that music, aren't you glad we live in the United States of America? Now, Ron Walker mentioned earlier that he's in his second retirement. I recently retired, and I can't think of ever coming back. But one of the benefits of my newfound freedom is being able to focus my energy on spreading the word about the legacy of President Richard Nixon, a man for whom I worked. Best of all, I can do that alongside a man of great vision, Ambassador George Arduous. Together we sit on the board of the directors for the Nixon Foundation. Now, any of you who know George know that he is a unique man.
Cool it. But my wife knows the difference.
He's a Greek emigre from Detroit who got his start as a supermarket bag boy and became ambassador to Spain, but he had good training for that because he had purchased a professional baseball team, an airline, and as Julia knows, half the apartments in Orange County. Most importantly, he's my good friend and mentor, and I'm proud to serve alongside him this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Ambassador George Arduous.
Here, I'll let you take the formal notes. Thanks, Larry. I want to share with you something that I hadn't prepared, actually, about where's Gavin? Gavin Herbert and I had a very personal relationship with President Nixon. Gavin was his gardener. Is that right, Gav? Absolutely. Gardener Gavin was a gardener down at San Clemente. And Gavin and I and Don Cole had bought the San Clemente property, the land, that is, and the president owned the house. And we had about, 13, 14 acres there, Gavin, and pardon? 22 altogether. But Gavin was in charge of landscaping. You know how flower-oriented he is. And it was a wonderful experience because all of us, Don Cole and Gavin and I, had worked in the '72 election campaign. But I was very fortunate in that I had time that I spent with President Nixon, and quiet time, which was unusual. The first thing that happened was that he had I think it was his brother's daughter was getting married in Seattle, and at the time I owned the Seattle Mariners. And Judy and I should say, owned the Seattle Mariners. Pardon me, honey. It was a family, right, asset. They didn't win much, but we made a lot of money. But at any rate, his brother's daughter was getting married up in Seattle. And so the president asked me, he said, George, geez, I'd like to come up and see a Mariner game while my brother's daughter's wedding's going on. And can I do that? I said, absolutely, Mr. President. Now, I was scared to death because the owner's box is a big box in this stupid kingdom that also you played basketball, soccer, football, and baseball in this dumb cement stadium in Seattle, but at any rate, it was a fine stadium, and so we'd love to have you up there. So he came to the game, and I was nervous, and because the cameras focused on him and put him on the big screens, and I didn't know how the people would react, and I got really nervous about it, and do you know the game was going on, and they saw him on the television screen, and all of a sudden they started to clap. They stopped the ball game, and we had the president speak to the folks. And he was fabulous. And not only that, but the people in Seattle loved him. And then he went and spoke to all the sports writers, and they went down into the clubhouse after the game, which we lost. But President Nixon was really a person. He was a real human being. And my relationship, and I'm sure Gavin's relationship, and even Don Cole's relationship with him, was very personal. And I had great respect for him. And my wife and I used to take him to dinner alone in Laguna very often. And he was fantastic. He was just a wonderful human being who had been destroyed by the public outrage or whatever it was, whether it was right or wrong is immaterial. But he was a decent, wonderful human being. And Judy and I have great respect for him. Oh, excuse me, she changed her name. It's Julia. Julia and I enjoyed our time with them, but I wanted to give that just a personal outlook on our relationship with President Nixon because he was special, and I think, Gavin, you would agree with that. Well, it was very special. I want to thank my friend Larry Higbee. And now that the Marines have landed, I would have to produce the Chapman Choir, but they won't let me do that, or even come close. The Marines and their musical talent are absolutely fantastic. What more can one say on Donald Rumsfeld's extraordinary contributions to America and to freedom in the world? Don, you are a very special human being. Thank you for being an American. You've just heard it all from eyewitnesses, seriously, to his amazing career. Tonight is a very special evening, not just because of the fact that we are all gathered here together in this elegant, and it is very elegant room. It's amazing. And because the Jets and the Patriots are playing Monday night football. It'd be different that they were playing baseball and the Mariners were playing, but that's neither here nor there. Tonight is an even more special because Joyce Rumsfeld is here with us. And I'd like Joyce to stand up. Joyce. I want to pay a special tribute to the women who are married to those that serve in Washington. You deserve a Purple Heart. From that crew cut to a young congressman back in 1964 to a distinguished public servant and soon to be the best-selling author, Don Rumsfeld has been on duty for America for nearly, honestly, is this true? 50 years? Don, that can't be true. You're only 37. But that is amazing, and not the least of his many accomplishments is that his hair is not only there, but it's longer, and I'm jealous. He's got more of it. And his weight and his waistline aren't that far from where they were when he wrestled for Princeton. Did you play football, Don? You played football. That makes a great wrestler. President Nixon had a keen eye for talent, and he enjoyed working with bright, motivated young people. He had a special respect and affection for Don. Richard Nixon recognized that Don had that very rare combination of electoral savvy, intellectual curiosity, and the ability to focus on a goal and deliver the results. He has always been a can-do person. He's also recognized in Don a smart and canny politician whose moral and ethical plumb line was deep and true. President Nixon valued and cultivated many advisors, and the Nixon administration focused on bringing the very best and the brightest men and women to come to Washington to apply their talents. Many of them are here tonight, and I want to thank you all for serving our country, our President Nixon, and so much that you've done for all Americans that have served. But the President felt a special kinship with the men and women like him who had actually fought in the arena. People who had taken the risk, and made the leap, and put their names on the ballot and put themselves on the line in a political campaign. That's a kind of knowledge that you can learn in books. That's a kind of knowledge that Don Rumsfeld, still only in his late 30s, brought to the Nixon White House in the spring of 69. Sorry, Don, I missed it, but you look so young. It's fitting that Don received the Richard Nixon Foundation's Victory of Freedom Award. The bottom line of his long career and has been the preservation, the extension of freedom at home and abroad. Don Rumsfeld today, as he has been for every one of the last 4 decades, a young man, is upright and principled and smart and tireless. He's a stand-up guy and a steadfast friend, a genuine American patriot, a true American hero. And as many of you know, Don has a book coming out early next year. It's one of Washington's closely guarded secrets. I don't know why, Don, but I'm sure it's full of very interesting things. But I happen to know a little bit about known and unknown. It's a memoir of a different order. I'm told that there will be a website of which Don is going to make public thousands of pages of supporting documents, not like this crazy thing that's going on now with, called, what's it, Wikiki or Waikiki or whatever it is. Don, I have a suggestion for the website's title, Rummy Leaks. Of course I'm kidding, Don. But seriously, Don will be donating every dollar of his proceeds to military charities that help wounded troops, and their families, and the veterans, of course. It is yet another contribution to our country and a lifetime of public service that he and his wife have given to this wonderful United States. We look forward to reading the known and unknown Don, and we hope that Don will return to the Nixon Library to talk about it. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming and saluting the 2010 Victory of Freedom recipient, Donald Rumsfeld.
Congratulations, sir.
Donald, I want to present to you the Victory of Freedom Award to Donald H. Rumsfeld, Champion for the Cause of Freedom, the Richard Nixon Foundation, 2010.
Thank you very much. My goodness.
That's heavy.
It is. Very nice.
We'll put it right over there.
Yeah, I'll put it over here. They're right there. They're right here. Those are his remarks right here.
Oh, those are my remarks.
No, I think those are Don's.
No, those are mine.
Yeah, those are Don's right there.
Those are Don's?
Yeah. Don't screw this up, okay, Ambassador?
Those are yours. Here you go.
Actually, these are mine.
That's right.
Are those yours?
Yeah, I liked yours.
Oh, do you want to use them?
No.
Oh.
Thank you.
I think these are yours.
It is. It is. That's good.
I just want to make sure those are
Are you
yours.
sure those are hers?
There we go. Be seated. Thank you very much. George, thank you so much. You make me sound like I can't hold a job. Ron and Larry and the members of the boards of trustees here at the foundation, thank you so much for your invitation this evening. Thank you for this fine award. Thank you for that video, which was a lot of old friends saying an awful lot of nice things. And I'm very grateful to all of you for being here this evening. I must say that as I watched Ron take over here some time back and throw himself into it and bring that wonderful energy that he has, I was so grateful that the Nixon legacy would be re-energized and brought forward to a new level. And Ron, I thank you for doing what you've done. And Sandy, where's Sandy? Somewhere. He's kind of like the roving troubadour with his microphone. I've been watching him. And Sandy, we're delighted you're doing what you're doing. This, when I think about the tour we took today around here, I was so impressed. And I think about the legacy that our 37th president has, a legacy at once confounding in its tragic and premature end and impressive in its enduring and very positive imprint on our country. This evening is a welcome respite for me. I've been working for 4 years on the book that George described, which is due out in February. I don't think anyone will be surprised. The 2 easiest words I wrote in the book were to Joyce as the dedication. Writing the book, it's my first book. I didn't know how to write a book. For me, it was a known unknown, as Charles Krauthammer would say. But it did offer an opportunity to touch base with an awful lot of old friends from different points in my life, and that's been fascinating. I debated writing a quick book in a year where I just used my memory, and I rejected that idea and decided to spend 4 years and use my archive of notes and snowflakes and memorandum and dictation I did after my votes in Congress and the like, going back to my parents' letters back and forth to each other during World War II, and decided to use that resource and have found that it is, as Richard Nixon, I'm told, once said, I can't remember if I read it or heard it, but apparently he said that writing a book is one of the most disciplined things that I do. It's very hard work. He's right. And I found that to be the case. I can identify with it. It makes me wonder how in the world he could write all those books he wrote, which was impressive, Richard Nixon. It's taken so long because I believe you have a person who's had the opportunities I've had has an obligation to try to present it accurately, to talk to a lot of people and triangulate and see that your memory's calibrated properly, of combing through original documents, and as was said, we're going to have a website to include a lot of those documents and give people, historians and others, a chance to go back to the original memorandum on which the comments in the book are based, and also of carefully checking the facts. And above all, I think a person has a responsibility of telling it straight, of celebrating successes, yes, to be sure, but also confronting the less successful moments in I suppose, that are a part of every human being's lives, and certainly mine. Writing some 700 pages of history with more than 1,300 source notes and backing him up with a website, I hope will provide readers some new facts and some new truths about the times that we served. So many people here in this room. We sat with Todd, and I saw Dwight Chapin here, and Larry, who we were telling old stories back there at the table laughing, and Jim, and I see so many friends here in this room that I worked with. I hope that people will see some new truths and about the times we all served together, but it may surprise some, particularly those who have relied on the narrative that gets told over and over and over again in the media. In going through my archival material, I discovered, or rather rediscovered, that Richard Nixon was one of the first people to write me after I was first elected to Congress in 1962. And he had just been defeated as governor and was leaving the political scene. He had some choice words for the media at that final press conference, as I recall. And he wrote a very nice letter to a newcomer. I'm sure he wrote all freshman Republican congressmen that year, congratulating them and saying, quote, as he left the political arena, he said, he was encouraged that there were young Republicans who would continue the fight. And I wrote him back saying that I did not accept his retirement and hoped that I'd be fighting alongside him one day. That exchange was not unusual at the time, but it proved to be prophetic. 6 years later, he had won the presidency and invited me to serve in an executive position and in his cabinet. We're all acquainted with the familiar portrayal of Richard Nixon as a somewhat embittered and somewhat lonely human being. Well, that's not the Nixon I knew, and I suspect for many of you here, that's not the Nixon that you knew either. I know Gavin and George and others had a close personal relationship. One of the most enduring legacies of his presidency is the team that he surrounded himself with. The man who some people described as an introvert brought into his orbit a truly impressive array of talent that would affect the course of our country's history for decades thereafter. Many of those individuals are in this room. Some we saw on that impressive video that was just presented. Some have passed away, people like Pat Moynihan, Bryce Harlow, and others who also served during that period. As diverse as they were, they seemed to share a reasonably rare trait. They could distinguish between the seemingly urgent and the truly important, and focus on what was important. I suspect they appealed to Richard Nixon because he was a brilliant thinker himself. I remember being invited into the Oval Office, or actually more in the Executive Office building, his little retreat he had over there, where he'd be working away with his feet up in a yellow pad, writing notes, planning personnel moves, thinking about counseling and mentoring younger people, coming up with speech ideas, boiling tough problems down into bullet points. He was a man who, despite the pressures of the presidency, was determined to find time to pause and think and use that fine thinking machine of his to sketch out his thoughts and fashion a way forward. In those sessions, he would raise ideas, discuss them, write them down, come up with 5 ideas and reject 3 or 4 of them, and keep on writing and keep on thinking as he worked his way through problems and developed personal conviction of his own about what course of action made the most sense. Today it seems like we think about leaders and we read about leaders, and often we hear about focus groups and polls and campaign consultants, legions of advisors gaming out a policy or a position that could affect this or that particular demographic group. The 24-hour media cycle and it is a new information age, this 21st century, tends to encourage a myopic approach by causing politicians to be expected to respond to instantaneously to the minute-by-minute news being reported in the media, instead of on the larger and truly important issues. Without strategic thinking, big ideas can get lost, and everything can become a priority, and if everything is a priority, nothing is a priority in life. This president of ours, the 37th, understood that. So that wasn't a problem for Richard Nixon. His accomplishments were the product of a mind and an administration that thought on a grand scale. His presidency came crashing down at its apex, just as his greatest contributions, his biggest ideas, were bearing fruit. To mention but a few, Nixon's opening with China, turning a communist foe into a counterweight against an expansive Soviet empire. His critical support for Israel during the Yom Kippur War that would be the basis for a more stable peace, that would be something that Anwar Sadat and Menachem Begin would then courageously forge just a few years later. And though perhaps his most undervalued, but in my estimation, one of his most enduring contributions to freedom was his leadership in ending the draft and creating the all-volunteer military that we are privileged to have today. Every one of those young men and women that were here and with the flag detail and the drum and bugle corps, each one of those individuals volunteered. They all raised their hands and said, "Send me." I first became interested in the draft as a young congressman from Illinois. I went to a conference at the University of Chicago, and I ran into a brilliant economist named Milton Friedman, who was passionate about ending the draft. I think it was 1965 or 6, and he talked me into introducing legislation that would end the military draft and support an all-voluntary system. He was then in the unenviable position, as was I, of arguing against a draft system that was supported by the military. It was supported by the academic community because they had exemptions, teachers and students. It was supported by the Johnson administration, the draft, and it was supported by the old bulls in the United States Congress of both political parties. The country liked the draft. And what it did, very simply, was cause people to do something that they might not want to do. It tended to pay people 50 or 60% of what the civilian manpower market would have paid them. And then it tended to take a few privileged segments of our society and exempt them from that. And the effect was that there were some big forces arrayed against an all-volunteer military, and they were many and varied. But they ultimately were not strong enough to surmount the persuasiveness of the arguments of a patriot, Milton Friedman, who believed in the power of a free market to determine wages and determination. And also, they couldn't surmount the persuasiveness of President Richard Nixon, a president who was determined to end the draft and establish for our country an all-volunteer system. Some look back on our most recent decade, this decade, of partisanship and heated opposition to controversial wars. But those of us who were around in the 1960s and 70s, in the Nixon era, and those of you who are old enough to look back that far, and I see a few of us who can look back that far. Think back on that period. Think of the riots and the demonstrations and the fact that President Johnson couldn't leave the White House and the violence that occurred in the aftermath of the assassinations of President Kennedy and Martin Luther King and the Civil Rights era. It was a period where many cases, the demonstrations were fueled by opposition to the Vietnam War. Our troops returned from battle to be ridiculed. and insulted. General Pete Pace, former Marine, first Marine to become chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, who was on the video this evening, told me that when he came back from Vietnam, he was advised to change fast into his civilian clothes because of the harassment that the military people were receiving if they were seen on the streets or in airports or train stations in their uniforms. In 1975, I was the first Secretary of Defense to arrive in office when the all-military system was fully in place. And I happened to be in the same post a second time when the catastrophic attack by the terrorists on 9/11 forced us to call our forces into sustained battle for the first time since Vietnam. The difference between then and today is dramatic. It is breathtaking. Today, as controversial as the current wars became, never did respect for our armed forces among the American people waver at all. Our military today is capable, dedicated, and overwhelmingly supported by our citizens. And that's a lasting tribute, I would say, to Richard Nixon and his vision for an all-volunteer Army. I do want to, before closing, express my thanks to the Marines that were here today and for the music they played. And I think the singer who sang the Star Spangled Banner, I think it was Ronnie Britt. I tell you, if I could sing, that's the way I'd sing. Today we went over and looked at that small house, the catalog house that apparently Richard Nixon's father put together. Someone said they paid $800 for it. If anyone here hasn't walked through it, you ought to really do that tomorrow. It's quite a sight. It's impressive that a person born in there was able to go on and become President of the United States. The vast opportunities afforded by the American system were not lost on that young man who grew up in that catalog house in a middle-class suburb in Southern California. I look back on a life blessed by those kinds of opportunities that he saw. I'm struck both by how central freedom is to our country and how critical it is for each generation to see that our freedom is in fact preserved. It's a responsibility that each of us have. From the civil rights movement to the multi-generational struggle of the Cold War, to the combat troops that are spread across the world today in Iraq and Afghanistan and serving in the Horn of Africa and elsewhere, I have seen firsthand the power of freedom. For me, there's an image that best captures the power of freedom, and I think they can put it up if they have it handy. It's a picture of the Korean Peninsula. It's a satellite photo, and if you look at it, they're the same people north and south. They're the same resources north and south. There's no difference. The only difference is that south of the demilitarized zone, the 38th parallel, you see all that energy and all that light and all that activity, human activity. I don't know what they are today, South Korea, but it's probably the 8th, 9th, 10th, or 11th largest GDP in the world. And above the DMZ is darkness, except for one pinpoint prick of light at the capital city of Pyongyang. The starvation in the north is so serious that they take people into the military who are under 5 feet and weigh less than 100 pounds because of starvation and malnutrition. And in the south, anyone who's been there, you can see energy and activity and success. And the difference is, in the one case, a free political system and a free economic system, and in another case, a dictatorship and a command economy. That says it all for me. I think that we need to remember also that the reason South Korea is free today is because of Americans. It's because a generation of our young people were willing to serve. They were willing to travel across the ocean to fight for the freedom of others, ultimately to preserve our own. And it's no different today for our men and women who serve in the military all across the globe. I was in Seoul when I was serving as secretary, and we were on about the 8th, 9th floor of a high-rise building looking out at this wonderfully successful place. And a woman reporter came up to me. This is, I'm going to guess it's probably 2005, 4, 5, or 6. She came up to me, and the Korean parliament was debating whether or not they should allow the Korean military to serve in Iraq, whether they should vote to approve the idea of a contingent of Koreans. And this young woman reporter, I'm going to guess her at 40, everyone's young to me at 78, you can imagine. But she said, put a mic in front of me, and she said, why in the world should young men and women from South Korea, the Republic of Korea, travel halfway around the world to fight in Iraq? And I pointed out the window, and I said, that's the answer, right there. Why in the world should young Americans have traveled halfway around the world to fight in South Korea? And the answer is freedom. So this evening I thank you. I accept the award on their behalf, and with them in mind, those that serve, those that have served in the past, those who've suffered, those who fought for freedom, and on behalf of their families who also served. So I thank you for this very special evening. It is wonderful to be with some very old friends and to honor a president who did so much to advance the cause of freedom and opportunity here at home and across the globe. It's a privilege for me to be with you, and I thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for permitting us to honor you tonight. It was indeed a privilege. And in the spirit of tonight, I'd like to ask Robbie Britt to return and to close the evening.
While the storm clouds gather far across the sea, let us swear allegiance to a land that's free. Let us all be grateful for a land so fair, as we raise our voices in this solemn prayer. We all know the next part. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her, and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies to the oceans white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains, from the mountain to the prairies, to the oceans, white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home, sweet home, my home. Thank you.
Thanks, Sandy. It really was. Thank you, Robbie. Will you go over to the Secretary's table and give him some lessons? I think he's ready for it. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. Thank you for supporting the foundation. Thank you for being our enablers. We hope to see you again. You're free to go. Go in peace. Thank you.